This is the Non-Tech Podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am located in Manaquesk in St. John, New Brunswick, which is situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik Maliseet people.
Greetings, one and all. Seasonal greetings. We're sort of in that weird in-between Halloween, Remembrance Day, but then also going into Christmas-ish period for those who partake. So hence my virtual background. I put in something to the effect of Happy Leaf Monster or something, and this is what the AI spit out. So in any case, always a pleasure, Doug, to see you, and happy seasonal, affected greetings. SAG, seasonally affected greetings.
Yeah, we should TM that.
We've got so many friggin' rad acronyms now. Like when I was like, I completely... You're telling me that like I sort of coined in the initial usage the PRINCEP, the PEI acronym, Personal Education Infrastructure, and I was like, okay, I don't remember saying that, but now, man, we just got to start racking it up. I noticed in the show notes today, by the way, that you were very helpfully included some tags, some categories, so we're going to have more robust and meaningful metadata. And I don't know that I'll necessarily go back on every episode, but I figure that by the time we're at, episode 137, it'll just be like, okay, we got the majority of it, what we need. Or if any academic software or book publishers wanted to pay us for such endeavor, I'm open to that. I can't speak for Doug. Anywho, 506 Consulting, for those who don't know. Right, we will take money. Oh man, and speaking of curation, that's like money is, speaking of curation, so first of all, I was going to say money rules everything, and let's never forget that. But then after that, I was going to say, Doug, why don't you tell us about today's topic, my friend?
Topic today, technology's impact on curation and selective choices in education.
Whoa, and that's a mouthful, man.
It is. Yeah, it's what is technology choices doing to our teaching and our learning? That's basically where I want to head.
Wow. One of a series, I'm here to tell you, folks. You heard it here first. So please elaborate, I suppose. You said that very succinctly, and I was sort of like, do tell, my friend. So why don't you give us a little bit more as to the why, because I'm always interested in where this stuff comes from. Yeah?
Yeah, it comes from conversations I've had over the last 20-some years. Like, I remember when there was one LMS, right? And it was WebCT.
What was it? What was it called?
It was called WebCT. And it had the little professor icon that was supposed to do something. And
that was the only one?
I happened to be at... Yeah, Blackboard came out. I'm pretty sure Blackboard came a little bit later. And I was actually teaching at Curtin University when Moodle got created. And then
That's in
things have gone
Australia,
from
right?
there. Yeah, that's in Western
Okay.
Australia. Curtin University of Technology.
Cool.
That's where I was teaching engineers how to have social skills and how to do communication
Good luck with
stuff.
that, my friend,
I
as
think
somebody who's worked with engineers. But, haha, engineers lacking social skills.
They were fantastic people, and this was the one mandatory course that they all hated, because it was like, here's how to do presentations, here's how to write full sentences, here's how to talk to other people using language and not numbers and formulas and stuff. And they were all nice. I really enjoyed teaching them because they were earnest, and I'll take anybody that's honest and earnest.
Yeah.
Somebody should write a book like that, like The Importance of Being Earnest.
Ernest Hemingway in AI. I'm like, dear AI, please scan this 150-page novel in the nanosecond that it will take you, and then write it except using 1980s or 1990s themes. It'll do it. And I'm just, okay, so now this sort of brings us to some of the maybe more salient points here, if I can make a sort of segue. It's like curationship, but like in the age of AI, I think we're starting to find out, or have found out, maybe I'm just late to the party, but like back when Web 2.0 was being spoken of as like a thing, like, oh, the internet, except interactive, right? User-centered, do tell. Well, now, I mean, one small leap for mankind, one giant leap for AI. That's kind of, that's where we've come since then, and we're talking only within the past 10 to 15 years. I had in my thesis, my doctoral thesis, right? I had the Web 2.0 as a term to be like within my nomenclature, my glossary or whatever. So anyway, I think your timing here is salient, pal. I think it's very cool that we've got this. So shall we start looking at your first of your cool list of references here, my friend?
Just before, and the first one is
Okay.
a Seymour Papert reference, because
I noticed that.
awesome.
That when I looked at that, I was like, "Well done for constructionism." For those, well played there, dude. Okay, that's
It was one of these articles that I had downloaded and saved on my computer. It was part of my digital clutter. I didn't go find it. It was already on my computer. So I've had
what
it
does
for
it bring you
20-some
joy?
years
That's
now.
like the Mary Kondo, like declutter your life kind of show on Netflix, right?
When I found this, it brought me joy. I didn't know it was there, and then I knew, and I was like, "Yeah, baby, this is it. This is the one."
Mother
So
load.
before we even
Well
get
done.
into that's it. So before we even get into our topic, I'm going to jump us back before any of the literature that I have.
Please do.
The technology that we choose have impacted education for as long as we can remember.
Correct.
Right? Like you go back to the ancient Greeks, right? And there was the big thing, don't write it down because that'll hurt your memory. Right? Like if you have to write it down, then you're just reading. It's not helping.
It was controversial.
Right?
Like these stone tablets are not to be trusted. These papyrus scrolls are corrupting your mental abilities.
Yeah. These chalks, this chalkboard and chalk, that's no good anymore. You got to use a pencil and paper. And then what type of pencil do we use? Yeah, right. Like how come we have to use like an HB pencil? How come we can't use like a 2B or a 6H? Or why are we selectively getting things down to certain things? And I know why with the pencils, because when you put them through the Scantrons, certain pencils don't leave a dark enough mark for the Scantron to read it. So that standardized test ends up being useless, or inaccurate or whatever. I'm not going to do standardized test stuff or Scantron stuff today. I just throwing it out there
I
as
think we should do an
the
entire
technology
episode
has
about
impacted.
hands-on testing. I think that would be like a theme, to be honest. I have so many thoughts about this show that I don't tell you, like, you know, in terms of like, what if we did an episode, or what if a book proposal contained like what? So I'll just barge in here, and one of the things to speak to curation, you know, because I'm always like, how can I monetize something potentially, just if a human wanted to? And one of the thoughts that I had that might be like an interesting angle to the non-tech book, as such, TM, registered trademark, is that what if we sort of look back respectively on our careers from the perspective of, you know, essays about things that didn't work in our careers in terms of like digital projects or stuff like that, or not even necessarily things from our careers, but things that like, wow, that sure started with a lot of potential and didn't, and then just sort of like, you know, talk about, you know, not debacles, but things that started out with great potential, to put it the way that an author might, and great expectations, sorry, the Tolstoy, and then completely underperform from an ed tech standpoint. Anyway, dude, I barge in, I digress, but please continue.
Okay, I just wrote all those down. I hope that helps.
Great. Please.
Hey, man.
I took the opportunity to refill my coffee cup. Sorry, dude. It was like,
No, that's when the microwave gets turned on in our house, we lose Wi-Fi.
really, that's an interesting quirk.
Yeah, I'm working on it. So sorry about that. That was 100%. 100% at this end.
Well, I'm going to edit out some of the gap, but not necessarily all of the gap with Camtasia. And I'm just sitting here because
Fair
I
enough.
totally didn't throw on a different shirt or anything like that. Just totally normal from a continuity perspective, folks. So, speaking of curation of sorts, do tell, pal.
Are we
in terms of
recording again? Or
well, we've been recording the whole time because I didn't want to discontinue the recording and then have to generate a new link and yada yada. So what I'm simply going to do is download. For those who might be interested in how we do this on the show, and how you might be interested in taking care of this yourself, in such instances where you can keep the recording going rather than initiate a whole new recording that the system has to track. And I just feel like, okay, I'll take the MP4, I'll throw it into Camtasia, and it will take me 10 seconds or fewer to remove a whatever that was, 7-minute gap. So
yes, indeed. So to jump into our topic, which is about curation and technology and how all that impacts our learning and education. The first article that I have is a Seymour Papert article, Technology in Schools to Support the System or Render It Obsolete. And before I even start on the topic, the word obsolete is spelled wrong in the source material. So that's why I put a little comment there saying I like the SIC in the title, the SIC, because that spelling mistake is not me. That is 100%.
I corrected it in the slides and on the WordPress, and I'm going to stand by that. And if Seymour Papert wants to, I'm pretty sure he's deceased, come back from the grave and fight me over it, then I suppose I'm prepared to contend with that. But that's some interesting info there, pal.
Yeah, I just like when those things slip by. It makes me feel good about some of the stuff that I let slip by.
For
I
sure.
love sick. I like that whole concept. So
Yeah.
what Tappert is saying is that as long as schools can find technology to improving what they're already doing, then really changing the system, nothing significant is going to happen. So we just want, like, I have two examples. Like in Australia, there's a national radio station called Triple J, and their mandate is to figure out the music that people are going to like in the future. Right? It's like, you may not like it right now. This is like the up and coming and the emerging, and this is what's going to be hot a month from now, or 2 months from now, or 3 months from now. And they always take flack from people saying, you're not playing the hits. And they're like, no, we're making the hits. We're telling you what you're going to like in a couple of months. And we're always a couple of months ahead. Yeah, it's the same as the Henry Ford reference from back in the day, where he said, I don't ask the general public what they want, because if I did, they would have told me they wanted faster horses. And that's not what we're doing here. So that change needs to happen. It was like when you told the story about Cutter and PB Wiki, right? Like you were trying to do something new. You were not trying to just replicate what already happened. Is that sure. A fair comment?
I think so. Sure.
And
I appreciate it.
Well, how do you help them learn in a different way if you don't try something new? If you do the same old, it'll be, yeah, here's your worksheets, right? Fill in the blanks, right? Answer the questions on the sheets and then put them in this pile at the end of the class. I grew up with a little bit of that, so it's that kind of silliness.
Right.
So we got to think about what we're doing. We have to think about what we're doing. And that leads me to Stockwell, the 2007 Stockwell article. Yeah,
totally.
Can you imagine being mindful and thinking about it matters? It's just crazy to me that, yeah. And when I take a look at things, I always think, like, why didn't I think about that before? Like, why? And sometimes you have to get there, right? Like you have to, okay, if I hadn't gone through this experience, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have thought about that differently. And it's the way, like in all the old stories, like the old people are wise. It's like, yeah, they've been there. They've seen it. They've been through versions of this already. So it's one of those kind of things. Because if we look back a year, right, we learned a ton already with our technology choices and how we've changed and what we've learned and how we've moved forward. And you're the one doing the vast majority of the technology stuff. So when I look at some of the decisions that we've talked about and you've done, no, man, I'm not even trying to blow smoke up your kilt, right? You're the one that figured out the WordPress, you figured out how the Blueberries thing, you figured out how to get us on all the like Spotify and Google Podcasts and all that. So I give you credit for that. And we were trying to do something different. Yeah, okay, when you make the hand signals, the hand gestures disappear into your angry leaves.
Yeah, right. No, man. I mean, like I said from the beginning, I mean, I just sort of what it takes sometimes to go from sort of being very conceptual or just sort of carrying a thought around in your day is very often my experience, at least within the professional world, and I'd even say outside of that too. It's just sort of something you're carrying around in your mind until very often you run into somebody who sort of helps you sort of bring it forward to a certain point, and then it starts kind of taking on a life of its own. So I appreciate the shout outs. I mean, for me, it just sort of having somebody on board to sort of, you know, ensure that such a thing could come out a couple times a month or better. For me, that was like, okay, so now I can actually dig a little bit further into this existing skill set that I have, which is WordPress, really. Shout out to Thompson Rivers for getting me onto that. And I actually do legitimately mean that. That's not even a snarky, mean thing. That's just like, I do appreciate having been tuned in there, because it's something that now, since TRU, I think ironically enough, you know, with the 2 podcasts and everything else, it's something that I've sort of moved forward far more voluminously, you know, with volume, with greater frequency than I did in the past with them, while I was sort of acquiring, I suppose, such skill, but then also being bound by certain organizational and sub-organizational kind of factors, I suppose. So it's just kind of interesting to be further down the path of the career. And now, I mean, just in terms of what I'm up to now, it looks like there's going to be learning management stuff. Looks like there's going to be CMS stuff, content management system. WordPress is a CMS for those who don't necessarily know or care, but there you go. And there we go to then what's ostensibly a blogging software format is for curation purposes, Doug. So that meandering, sort of winding anecdote did ultimately chug along to a certain point of relevancy, I hope.
Yeah, you headed right into the Stockwell 2007 article about
Sweet.
Technology choice for teaching language skills in areas and the call literature. Because what they looked at, what Stockwell looked at, was when you choose technology on the grounds of pedagogical objectives, means that that's why you're selecting it. You have specific values and specific goals, and the features of technology help.
Values and goals.
It's like the way it's amazing. Let's think about it. Where do we want to go? Okay, what functionality and what affordances do these technology bits have? Because we could have gone other ways. We did not have to end up in WordPress, right? We could have gone a much harder way, or several much harder ways. But
WordPress no other format. I'm just like, it's like the what do you call it? The bricular approach, where you kind of grab what's close at hand, what you already know. I mean, for sure. I mean, we could have mounted it on a wiki, I suppose, if that was sort of, well, I don't know how we could have punched it into a Google Doc. I mean, really, if it's just like you need this amount of links and this amount of content, I mean, could have put it out as a newsletter. I think about all the possible iterations or formats this could have had, which brings me back to, I hope, what I was saying earlier. We're going to keep that in about, possible, like what if, the multiverse of madness, the Doctor Strange, like, oh, well, what if they did that episode on a vinyl record, or what if they had cassette only for one particular thing? So I don't know. It'd be, it's interesting. This is the stuff that finds me still interested in these kind of aspects of the job, of the career. Sorry, bud. Kind of wandered us off into the multiverse there, pal.
Nope. Now, as we wander off, one thing I'm going to say is I would prefer doing something on vinyl, because I have 3 record players. I have no audio tape players anymore. And the only CD player I have, I think, is in my car. So vinyl would be my choice moving forward, just because of the ability to play. I don't want to have that situation.
For $300 or less, you can get a single box that has all those things, and then plus we'll play MP3s. So FYI.
I don't think you understand how cheap I am,
Oh,
or thrifty.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay.
In Canada,
Well,
I'm cheap. In Scotland, I'm thrifty.
totally legit. I'm actually going through perspective now, a phase, a time where like I'm actually trying to make it deliberately inconvenient for myself to use money. So like I lost I think I mentioned on the show, I lost my wallet on the bus. I haven't really replaced it properly. What I've been doing is kind of keeping everything I need in like this measuring cup. And then like before I go out, like, what do I think I'm actually going to legit need to bring with me whatsoever? And usually that's just my bus pass. And I know that if I bring my ATM card, for example, I'm more likely to wander down to the mall and have a $20, fast food lunch or whatever. So I'm just like, nah, I'm going to deliberately make it difficult for me to access stuff, to the point where I'm like, I'm taking cash around and, just kind of, and when the cash isn't there anymore, I'm like, oh, okay, I no longer have spending options. So I suppose in a way I'm trying to be more mindful about my use of this, somewhat imaginary, but, totally impactful currency, right? So
What you just did is you just described adding friction to your technology use and your learning. And you're curating your technology every time you walk out your door, right? To give you certain options and certain ways to do things that day.
Well, it's so now we could have just kept using Skype for this program, except that we had the glitches, right? So, for whatever reason, the place that I'm living now, the internet just isn't as robust through Skype. But since we started using StreamYard, which is admittedly a paid service, I just consider this okay. This is like I don't know, $15 a month well spent or whatever it is, because I get the benefit of having the two podcasts mounted on here. And it's sort of because of their, patented algorithm or setup or whatever for capturing recordings. The network is sort of the kind of haphazard, antiquated maritime physical networks are perhaps less of a factor with their sort of the capacities of the app, I suppose you could say, right? So to me, I'm like, okay, so this is something where I didn't have a need for it before, but now we do, and now it's just sort of, it wasn't like, oh, I got to find something cool for the thing. It's just more like out of necessity, you move towards something, and then you inadvertently find, oh, well, maybe I will do this ridiculous leaf monster AI thingy, which took 30 seconds that were well used, in my opinion. And then this is where I can start kind of mentioning, things that are tangential and bringing them in because the foundation has been laid through the proper configuration of a format, if you follow me there, Doug. Doug, here's a question. How much of your job is more Here's a question, Bud. How much of your job would you say consists of doing technical stuff versus instructional stuff? Do you know what I mean? Or administrative stuff? Do you have kind of a ratio there?
Not much technical stuff now.
Okay.
A year and a half ago, it was a lot more technical. But now,
Okay.
like I built structures to help me. So I like 20-1, right? Instructional admin to technical. But when I need
Okay.
to know it, the technical. It's got to be very specific. It's that very specific thing in there in that one app. How about you? Where you sound like your job's headed the other way.
Right. So I've really had the opportunity to sort of see now meaningfully what it's like to kind of go from starting at a certain point and being invited or given kind of the opportunity, if you will, to kind of do a full on environmental scan, do a full on sort of survey, both of the organization that I'm with, and then also kind of the space that we occupy relative to the region, but even more broadly, and sort of what their kind of approaches to teaching and learning, training, if you will, may be compared to ours. So then you sort of, once you get kind of a sense of the lay of the land, I guess, for want of a good term, I'll just throw that out. Then you can start going, okay, so now what's going to be culturally specific? What's going to be meaningful? So, I mean, I actually put into a PowerPoint with some with one of my first regular meetings with the CEO. I was like, okay, so it's going to be like an ecosystem, and I actually put like, here's a picture of a pond, and then I started out, and then I overlaid the various aspects of, like, here's the LMS, here's the other LMS, here's, and sort of laid it out visually on top of a pond. And he just kind of nodded, but he was very kind. He was like, no, that I see that. I'm like, just trust me, if you want to be able to say downstream, so to speak, further down the pike, so to speak, you want to say, well, what we've got here stands up. What we got here is like robust. I feel, for me, as I sort of came out of the doctoral thingy with education, was it actually does matter what your conceptual thing is. It actually does matter what your ontology and epistemology orientation happened to be. So for me, one of the things that I took away that was positive from my time at TRU, with particularly working with the decolonization and indigenization group, which was pretty impactful and which I've talked about a lot on the show, not so much recently, but the necessity in situating what you're doing in tangible, physical, metaphorical language that you can then justify all the stuff kind of going beyond that. So anyway, Doug, a bit of a ramble there, a bit of a tangent, but I hope you see sort of what I'm getting at there.
I do, and I'm going to apply that to technology now. Your concepts, because the Lane 2009 article about insidious pedagogy, they are talking about how we believe technologies are neutral. And 20 years ago,
such a scam.
I believed I had a normal.
So bogus.
Yeah, like I didn't understand that I didn't have a normal upbringing, that not everybody in my province or in my country got the same type of upbringing. And with like the TRC calls to action, it's like, whoa, I'm an educated guy and I do a lot of reading, and I had no idea about a bunch of this stuff. So it wasn't neutral. It was 100% biased. And when we look at that at a more micro level with the technologies that teachers are choosing, it's the same thing. It's building structures in, and it's forcing us a certain way. And they do have direction and intent, and they do have formats that you got to get stuck into.
Yes.
Because what do you mean we have to do this multiple choice exam? What do you mean this class has to be 39 hours across the semester? Why are those structures in place? And who are they helping and who are they not helping? And why am I picking the technology to do that thing, whatever that thing happens to be? Because that's what I need to work inside the system, even though the system is biased. What are we doing? So when you talk about your ontologies, and for me, it's, did we think about this? Have we been open and honest about it? Is this the direction? It's that kind of stuff that Lane is talking about with the insidious pedagogy, and it forces people to do a certain thing.
Let me just say now that is such an awesome name for an article. That is just so like. I wish we had it. I wish somehow we could like just have had that for the Halloween episode area time, but no, man, that is legitimately sick. And then we got
this article.
sorry.
This article was so good, I couldn't take just one quote. I had to
Okay.
grab two different quotes. So
Did
those are
you?
two different concepts.
Oh, I see
I
that
put the
now.
dot in between. So
Gotcha.
there were two
Yes.
different things, and both of them were so important to where I wanted to talk. So I just enjoyed that. And that's a 14-year-old article. I found it this week. So I didn't even know it existed before now.
Insidious pedagogy. I'm just going to keep kind of enjoying that for the rest of the day until like that is pretty sweet, man. I gotta say. Okay, and now here's something that I just from my background as a language educator and a current somebody who's interested in writing and education generally. I'll the authors from 2020. The title here is what jumps out at me: Renewing Literature Circles, Pedagogies for Curated Multimodal Responses. Like every aspect of my career up until now just kind of goes, that's interesting to me. So why don't you tell me about like where that came from for you, pal?
So this is the Clunan, Patched, and Hutchinson article from 2020.
Yep.
And they talk about how using new technologies and new media to make meaning has increased. So we're doing the right thing, but sometimes it's slow, right? Like we take a look at what we've done with this podcast, right? Like at the beginning, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How are those structures going to go? And then I throw in my digital clutter at the end. So we find some literature, and then I throw in some pictures or images or diagrams or whatever I find, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And sometimes when I'm helping grad students, they just want to add words. And I'm like, no, give me a diagram, give me a picture. So then it's easier. You can't add words to the diagram or the picture. You have to rework it to make the learning happen. And one thing I love is they're optimistic. They're talking about how emerging literacies have emerged and are continuing to be defined. So we're headed in a good direction. We're figuring out how to help. And part of what I really like is like with the TRC calls to action, like Indigenous pedagogies are now being valued more. It's not just old white guy from Europe making that decision. It's let's explore the breadth of everybody's knowledge and everybody's learning. And the technologies can be used to help that. I did that years ago, 13 years ago, 12 years ago. We took iPads. I think I talked about it once before. We took iPads to northern communities in Alberta to work with some Indigenous and Métis communities there. And what we did was we got the elders on board. We got the elders to see the value of the students using the iPads to tell stories, because storytelling was such an important part of these communities. So it was once you get everybody else on board, and now I would change it, right? There's ways I would do it differently because I've learned, right? Like instead of spending a bunch of time just working with the students first, I'd go to the elders and the decision makers and the knowledge keepers first and have those conversations there instead of doing that after meeting the students. I would go right to them first. But anyway, it still worked. We still learned. The students still learned. It reminds me of what happened. I read this fantastic article about kayaks because I've got a kayak, and this company took kayaks to the north, like to the north, like Canadian north. And what they did is they wanted to get kids more active and everything. So the first thing they did is they got elders to get into the kayaks, because the elders remembered when they were little and their parents and grandparents and community put them in the sealskin kayaks and they paddled around. So the elders got in the kayaks and loved it. And they were like, oh, this is so wonderful. It reminds me of all this stuff. And they made that tie. So the technology there was the kayak, but it was really about how do we implement it? How do we get the elders on board? And it was easy. It was, you put the elders in the kayak and they're on board. It's awesome. On more ways.
Well, and if I may, I mean,
And
that
then
goes back
the young
to
ones
your
come
point
in.
earlier. Sorry, to speak to, or rather speak against this, notion that technology is value neutral. I mean, that's just something that's like driven me round the bend ever since I started thinking about this stuff. Like, it's the most education and how we do education is one of the most political and personal things that we do as a society, full stop. And it's deeply meaningful in ways that, say, your budget processes or your whatever other institutional things that the government's involved in don't really resonate with, just because it's so deeply personal. So again, just kudos for for bringing in the calls to action, first of all, because I mean that's something we can definitely stand to include more reference to explicitly within the show. Thanks there for that, Bud. And also just the relevancy of it, given the curation tip that we're on today. So sorry, dude. Just wanted to carry on and just say, well done there.
No,
bud.
no, not at all. Because some of what you've done is slid into the last article that I had, the Fonz 2022 article,
Good go.
an entangled
Okay.
pedagogy, and
Oh.
it's talking about if you take the technology and put it first, or if you take the technology and put it last, you're separating it from the pedagogy, and you can't do that, right? You can't be like pedagogically determinate or technologically determinate, right? Like you gotta go dance with who brought you, right? And the technology and the pedagogy have to come together. That all has to work to get to where you're going, which is helping the students learn as much as they can, helping them head in a direction to improve their lives or give them the knowledge or information that they need to move forward with whatever it is they're going to do. So the entanglement is such an important component, and that also gets ignored, right? Not only is it insidious, right? You can't leave it off to the side. It all has to go together.
Entangled, insidious pedagogy. I'm like, I got an AI thing that I did where like a sea monster with a leaf blower with like multiple tentacles. And yeah, entangled and insidious both, man. That's legit. It's formidable. And this is where I might in a previous time have gone for the Paolo Freire and kind of brought that out and gone, why yes. But sorry, dude.
No, as soon as I saw the title Insidious Pedagogy, I was like, oh, Paulo Freire. Let's go right there. But part of what we haven't mentioned is like bad practice. Like bad structures or poorly thought out structures. What if there was a Nobel Prize for education? If there was, and I know there's not, if there was, the person that comes up with a better way to do online discussion forums would win it. Because those continue to be horrible, right? We've had them for 25 years or something now, and they're still painful because the majority of people do the same thing. Here's your question, type your response, and then respond to 2 other people, and okay, that you're done for the week. That's your learning for the week. And it's like, oh, shoot me now, right? Put me out of my misery. Like, it's painful. I'm not learning. And there's other ways to do it. So it's one of those things. This is not all bright and rosy. It's a lot of people have made the decision to use discussion forums because they're built into every LMS now, and they're not used well. most of the time. Most of the time, there's still a disaster. It's still some kind of checklist thing to say, okay, I can make sure they're participating. It's like, are we making sure they're learning, or are we making sure we can mark their participation mark? So, yeah, I personally hate discussion forums because I rarely see them used well. I avoid them like the plague. I like journal, the journal or the diary tools that are in a lot of LMSs, because then it's private. Then it's
Right.
you write it, the student writes it, and the instructor sees it, and then you can have a real dialogue. It takes more work on the instructor's part, but I'm here for the students to learn, so I'm willing to put that time and effort in. So that's me on my soapbox. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, no, man. Again, this just kind of because this whole show kind of where the various inputs sort of emerge through initially a WordPress posting. I mean, I just kind of think back to blogging that I experimented with, going back to the point where I first had my first Google account or whatever. And just as somebody who's always had an interest in writing, just as somebody who's always kind of had an interest in media in some way, and it's just because it happened to be for me where just given the fact that I'm like 45, so 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I was kind of just sort of late high school, early university when the first public manifestations of the internet came into being, where your first discussion boards started punching up in public, and like we haven't come really that far in terms of like those like mail, those news groups, the way they presented those news groups and things
Yep.
like that. So I mean, it's been cool, right? Something as impactful, something that's rewired all of our brains, whether we won't like it or not, and the way that we live, such as the internet. First of all, I mean, the jury's still very much out in terms of how our long-term, metabolic and physical function is going to contend with that in evolutionary terms. But then just finally in terms of how far we've come, but how like still like, yeah, it's still just kind of like upload a file and say something about it. I mean, that's just, as you say, Doug, rather well. I think we can do better. I hope we can do better. So
I know we can. I'm an optimist when it comes to that. I know we can.
cool beans. So
last
we got some pretty
when
good.
we talked,
Yeah.
last week when we talked, you mentioned that I needed to present more digital clutter because you like to do a paragraph and a picture and a paragraph and a picture.
I was impressed this time. You did that very well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that's what you meant. So yeah, there's a bunch more now. And there's one that is kind of off topic, but really isn't. It's an old technology, well, old for us. Is the do you remember the old Magic Eye things from like the late 90s, early 2000s? Where you
Are
have
you
to
talking
like
about the
unfocus
picture
your
with
eyes
the
to get the
dog with
picture.
the podcasting set up, or what? Like which one?
Nope. If you go down past the training telephone and into, put your nose in the middle of the picture and slowly pull it away.
Oh yes, okay. There we go. There we go. Thanks, Brad. Sorry, just for people at home, it's the one that looks weirdly like a surreal wallpaper. That's my first impression of it.
Yeah, it's like 1960s wallpaper. There's another picture inside, and years ago that I knew people that had them on their walls. Like they would take them and frame them and put them on their wall. And it was a way to do whatever, right? It was just a thing, and it
So
just
you're talking
reminded
about
me of the
subliminal
technology.
messages in the wallpaper, Doug? Is that what you're talking about here?
Yeah, and like we move past some stuff, right? I don't know anybody that has that on the wall now. We tried it. Yeah, nah, we're moving on. What else is there? This didn't do whatever. This gave a lot of people headaches, and it gave a few people a sense of superiority because they could unfocus their eyes and see the other images that are hidden in there. So the one picture I'd really like to talk about is the sailing picture that I've included, and it says the pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the realist adjusts the sails. We as
Absolutely.
educators need to be more of a realist, right?
Yes.
The pessimists are the people like, no, I'm not doing that. You can't make me. And the optimist is like, oh yeah, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. And the realist is like, okay, let's do something about this. And I love that educators are so realistic about stuff. They're the ones that have to dig in and make that happen, whatever it is.
No, for sure. Because I mean, again, you're sort of for people who are at the front
And
line.
the rest is go ahead, sir.
After you, dude. I think we got a delay in the connection here. Pardon me.
Yeah, no, this isn't the first one this morning, but the other pictures are there are just because they tickle my fancy, and they fit with the whole concept of using technology and using it thoughtfully. So what I have is 3 words or 3 more things. The word of the podcast is curation, because you got to think about what you're curating and how you're curating it and why you're going there. The phrase of the podcast is seasonally affected greetings, just because I thought that was funny. A question of the podcast isn't mine this time. I actually pulled it out of one of the research studies that we talked about in the article, and it's like, do educators appear to have a clear idea in mind regarding their choice of technology or technologies in relation to students' learning objectives? And that came out of one of the studies, and I'm thinking my answer is no. Basically, I'll think a lot of too often the answer is no. They don't. They're using the technology because that's what their institution says they have to use, or what IT has said is possible to use, and sometimes the students' learning objectives are just left out. That's what I got. What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, man. I appreciate the additional content that we every time I get one of these docs, I'm like, okay, so in addition to the quotes, we got the images, and now we have all this additional material to sort of position through the format. So I guess, like in terms of some things that I've been up to within my role, I've actually been sort of stepping back into using LMS, and I've been rather disdainful of LMS for, I think, some pretty good reasons. But if it's in my circumstances within a workplace kind of learning environment as opposed to post-secondary as such, I'm kind of being given the opportunity to just sort of start from a starting point of 0 with something where in other institutions that I've worked at, or just generally, there's sort of habits and practices which sort of shape what you can do. So I think one of the more rewarding aspects isn't like going to be like, well, how do I reinvent the LMS? How do I do some sort of heavy lifting with the tech piece? Like, no, I'm looking to do the most minimal lifting as possible with the tech piece, so I can focus on quality of content, so I can focus on how the most current best document in our social, so in our SharePoint and everything else sort of makes its way into some of these training materials. So I don't think I can necessarily or would want to necessarily go further into that, but my thing now seems to have more to do specifically at this juncture with e-learning and instructional design. And so like, I think, again, when I saw your topic, I'm like, this is pretty timely, just kind of given what I have been doing and will be doing for the next few weeks anyway, in terms of building some e-learning stuff. And I guess just one of the things that resonated in terms of, what you spoke to there, Doug, just initially is like, for me, again, one of the positive sort of interesting things that I took away from my time at TRU was sort of getting to work with students to a degree on e-portfolios, and sort of just really how to do basic WordPress stuff. And even not even in terms of getting them how to do it, but just sort of seeing how you can take a very generic set of instructions. You can take the same interface for everybody. You can even have very, very cookie cutter kind of instructions. And then what the students sort of end up putting out through that, it's completely different every time. And that's always just, that's something, I guess, that being an educator in whatever way never gets old for me. Just like, wow, they just took something and did totally, who would have thunk that they could have done something like that? So anyway, man, bit of a ramble, but I think just the fact that this stuff goes up on a WordPress website, and that hopefully we have people who are checking us out on Spotify and all these other things. I mean, it's curation, right? It's like you can have it this, that, or the other. Which way? Just don't ask us where's the beef. There we go. Don't ask us where's the beef, Doug.
Fair enough. I'm old enough to remember that commercial.
Where's the beef?
Okay, that's all I got for today.
Okay, good
your
stuff.
patience with
And
my
me
technology
as
issues.
well. Got some other stuff that'll show up in the notes that I got tabs open for, but didn't speak to here. But always a pleasure, Doug. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Can I just ask, Bud, since what else you got planned for your Sunday? Can I ask?
Walk the dogs. We're going out to dinner, and I have to figure out how to rearrange some stuff in my back entryway or my mudroom. I was sitting at a red light on Tuesday and got rear-ended. So I have whiplash type injuries in my neck and my arm. So I can't really use this arm very much.
Oh.
So all the stuff where I could normally just grab things and move them around, right now I can't. Like, I took my arm brace off just for the recording. So I have to figure out how to put stuff back in place because I'm tired of everything being out of place. It just stops the functionality of the room. So I'm going to do a bit of that. Walk the dogs, eat, try to figure out how to fix that with a busted wing. How about yourself? You doing anything fun? Just hanging out?
Yeah, just hanging out. Gonna sort of, it's turning into a beautiful day. I feel like I gotta get outside and just sort of see. It's sunny. This is my last weekend of having a view of St. John Harbor. So seeing the Digby Ferry from my music room. I'm not leaving the dwelling that I'm in, the building, but I am moving into the basement at a very significant reduction in cost with my awesome landlords, Tony and Dee Dee. Shout out to Tony and Dee Dee, who I'm sure are not listening. Yeah, so I feel just like compelled to go out and check some of that out. And I'm doing, Dan and I will be doing the music podcast because it's that time of the month for that. Since they do that one about once a month ish, once every 3 weeks. So
right on. Well, it sounds like fun.
Happy Sunday, or whatever day this finds you all. We appreciate you checking it out. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Yep. Bye-bye.